Charlestown were confident they could wrap up the game in just a few overs, needing only 137. But someone forgot to tell the batsmen they actually had to stay at the crease and rack up the runs first. In the first hour, Charlestown lost 4 wickets for just 25 runs. Eventually, Ian Harris had to take some risks to try and make up the total. Charlestown, though, finished up all out for 127. With 72 overs left, Belmont were back into bat and scored 133 before Charlestown conceded they just couldn't win. After the game, the winners were letting off plenty of steam after months of competition and constant delays due to wet weather.
The titles have lured the nation's best with 120 boats taking part. They'll compete in 26 classes during the 2-day event. The outboards will be contested over 11 classes from the 25 horsepower races to the 210 km/h Formula 1 tunnel boats, making their first appearance on the Manning for many years. Winner of the 800cc open hull was Steve Madaris from the Central Coast in Team Suzuki. In the 4.6 metre displacement class, the winner was Chris McDonald driving Mr Mac. Racing will continue tomorrow.
Surf lifesavers noticed a man in trouble and came to his aid in an inflatable rescue boat. Unable to paddle due to the shoulder injury, he was pulled into the boat. However, lifesavers called for backup help from the Westpac rescue chopper as the dangerous surf prevented them from taking him ashore safely. A special harness was attached to the man's midriff and he was winched into the chopper. From there, he was taken to Gosford Hospital where he remains in a stable condition. Meanwhile, emergency services were called to another incident further up the coast this morning. 2 fishermen discovered a body of a man floating at the Newcastle bogey hole at about 8 o'clock. Police say there are no suspicious circumstances. Jason Neuenhoff, NBN News.
"13-year-old Mark O'Brien's Avery is a constant reminder of the loss of his 4 most prized possessions. On Good Friday, he locked the cage just before he went to bed, but that wasn't enough security to keep his dream to breed the birds. Wire was pulled back from the cage and the birds worth $800 each were stolen. Only Mark's 10 peach-faced parrots were left behind. He was given the ring-necked parrots only 2 days before the robbery, but now that generosity is gone, as is Mark's faith in people after the second raid on the Avery in less than 6 months.
There's no way you can describe this. It's just cruel, something to live on ripping someone off. Yeah, it's just not a way to live.
Mark will reinforce the Avery with steel mesh to try to keep thieves out, but worrying about the safety of his birds is an unnecessary burden on a boy who looks after his mum while she waits for a lung transplant.
Yeah, it's one thing I don't need, yeah. Mum's waiting for a lung transplant and this to happen as well. It's too much stress for anyone, really.
What makes the theft even more frustrating for Mark is that the quick grab for cash by the thieves was a fruitless exercise, as the birds can't be sold legally without breeding papers. Richard O'Leary, NBN News. What's attracted you to the bird?
This morning's road race was basically a sprint, 91 kilometres of relatively flat roads from Wyong to the end of the Yarramalong Valley and back. But unlike yesterday, where they had room to move on the expressway, the lead pack today had to dice with sightseeing traffic. The rest of the field just spread across the road, working together and taking turns at the lead. But when it came down to the last sprint home, Dean Jones from the Institute of Sport came out on top. However, Matt White from St George racked up too many points in the early stages and won the overall point score. The win and placing's vital to the riders' national point score total.
It was only a matter of minutes before the devastating force of the fire engulfed the two-storey Fullerton Street house. 3 fire units battled for 40 minutes to contain the blaze. It wasn't until firefighters began sifting through the ashes that the gruesome discovery of the body of 17-year-old Melody McDonald was made. She'd been visiting her boyfriend in his downstairs flat. Today, the landlord looked over the ruins.
I feel very sorry for the young lad that was renting the place there. He must feel very sad at this point in time. I think he's in a bit of shock.
Melody's boyfriend, 20-year-old Chad Morgan, escaped the flames by jumping through a window. He was discharged from John Hunter Hospital late today. He'd suffered smoke inhalation and lacerations. Melody, a popular student who'd left school in Year 11, worked at a local takeaway. Workmates too shocked to talk to the media.
Everybody that's came in this morning knowing the girl, and as I say, the reaction is just shock and horror to think it can happen, and to such a lovely girl.
Fire and physical evidence units are continuing their investigations, but it's believed burning candles in the lounge room may have started the blaze. With the small community left stunned by the death of the local teenager, firefighters say it was a tragedy that could have been avoided.
A lot of people usually think about fire detectors after a tragedy like this, but for a relatively small price, most houses could be have smoke detectors safely installed.
At the Ringwood Hill Climb circuit near Raymond Terrace, speed was the order of the day. 174 competitors from across the country ready for an uphill battle.
They're maybe not quite as quick as some of the modern cars, but they're just fun. They're a lot more fun than modern cars to drive up and down.
Martin Reeves from the Newcastle Club took out the fastest time of the day in his racing MGB, crossing the finish line in just 33.62 seconds. Brian Ford tried hard to beat his rival, but lost out on the corners. Keeping it in the family and the same MG, Martin's wife Louise clocked the fastest women's time. The event winds up 4 days of national competition, celebrating the MG Car Club's 25th anniversary.
Every event has run smoothly, the weather's been reasonable on most of the days, everyone's had a fantastic time, everyone from all over Australia said it's been fantastic and it's great for the hunter.
It's 4 days since Margaret Howlett was brutally murdered and her Denali Street house set alight. It was originally thought Mrs. Howlett died in the fire, but it appears that was a hurried action taken by her attacker to hide the real crime. Detectives today revealed the savagery inflicted on Mrs. Howlett, who suffered from arthritis and used a walker. She died of a fractured skull from one of several blows to her head. She was also sexually assaulted.
Well, initial tests indicate that she was sexually assaulted, but of course further scientific tests will be conducted to confirm that.
Police believe the fire in the house was burning for just 20 minutes. No accelerant was used, and with all the windows closed, there was little damage. The scene of the crime is virtually intact, which has helped police considerably in their investigations. Police say their investigation is going well, but they need more public help. They believe there are still people who were in the Denali area on Saturday night between 8:30 and 10:30 who have not come forward.
We urge people to rethink, and anybody that was at that area between 8:30 and 10:30 on Saturday night should contact us and tell us what they did or didn't see.
Mrs Howlett's funeral will be held in Singleton on Friday. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
This is the 2-centimetre piece of jagged glass one customer says he found in the bottom of a regular tub of KFC coleslaw. Nick Van Maastricht of Booragul was enjoying a meal last night when the glass became stuck in his throat.
Well, I started gaggling and coughing and spluttering, and I felt something lodging in my throat and sort of a bit of choking going on, and I sort of had to put my fingers in my throat to pull whatever out was in there. And when I pulled it out, there it was.
Nick says he was lucky. A father of 8-month-old twins, his major concern after the discovery was that the glass could have been swallowed by another family member.
They occasionally like a bit of salad and so forth, and I'm just glad it was me, not the kids. Because you can never tell with children, they lodge it in the back of their throat. How are you supposed to tell what's wrong with them, unless you see blood or something in the mouth?
The tub of salad was bought from KFC's Katara branch on Monday. A company spokesperson from Sydney's head office confirmed the salad had been made in bulk and transported to 153 outlets across the state where it was individually packaged. Today, KFC advised all stores not to sell any coleslaw with the use-by date of April 6. KFC says so far the discovery is an isolated case. It plans to analyse the glass in an effort to find out where it might have come from. Meanwhile, Nick says in future his family will be checking their salads a little more carefully.
No, they've still got a customer, but I'm only saying it for a warning to let other parents know, to sort of, if they've got small children, to be very, very careful.
The protesters from Save Animals from Exploitation, known as SAFE, had their own target. Caught in the firing line was Chris Harcher.
And like Sinn Féin to the IRA, Chris Harcher is rewarding these shooters. Every year when they break the law, they drink a lot of alcohol, they shoot protected birds, leave thousands there to die, and for what? For sport, and he rewards them with this season.
The duck hunting season began on March the 19th and runs until the end of next month. Protesters claim these protected birds were only a handful of those shot over the Easter weekend at a popular shooting spot 7 hours drive west of Sydney.
We picked up about 90 to 100 birds. Many are recovering that are alive, that have their wings half blown off, their legs, their beaks shot. A lot died, and a lot will continue to die throughout the rest of the season.
SAFE has a petition with 25,000 signatures on it calling for the total banning of duck hunting in Australia.
It's 12 months to the election. We're starting quite an intensive campaign starting from Easter, going throughout the whole year on a host of wildlife issues where Chris Harcher has failed time and time again.
A spokesman for Mr Harcher said the minister had tightened regulations for people wanting to get a shooting licence. He also said it was unlikely that duck hunting would be banned, as the minister also recognised the rights of recreational hunters.
The combined high school championships reputation has been built on a tradition of great sailing. But it was anything but plain sailing today, as Mother Nature turned its back on the championships, which had attracted boats of all shapes and sizes. The young sailors on more than 190 vessels were left to ponder what to do, as a listless breeze failed to generate any power. Some of the crews decided to stick together through the boredom, others cooled themselves off, while some crews were lucky the race was delayed. But after a 1.5 hour wait, the wind picked up and the boats were on their way. The vessels soon thinned out for an afternoon sailing. A Grafton High entrant used the sparing wind the best to win on handicap. The 35-foot yacht named Race won line honours in Division 1. The best of the Hunter contingent was Belmont High, which took out Division 3 line honours, and Maitland High, which won the same division on handicap. Race organisers say female sailors will be the ones to watch in the final 3 days of the championships.
They were pretty dominant last year, for instance. we had girls take up first and second placing. That's the first time in 27 years that the girls, and it's good to see because I think girls can handle sailing boats just as good as most of the boys.
The competition continues tomorrow. The crew with the best 3 heats over the 4 days to win the championships. In the first interest rates blow for homeowners in 4.5 years, many of the country's major lending institutions have increased fixed home rates. The St George rate jumped by 0.75%, with the Commonwealth Bank following its lead to have a fixed home rate of 9.25%. Westpac has maintained its rate, with the Greater Newcastle and Newcastle Permanent Building Society both unchanged. But Managing Director of the Newcastle Permanent Building Society, Frank Wotherspoon, says although most attention is focused on fixed rates, it's the variable home loan rates that affect 4 out of 5 homeowners. The major banks left their rates unchanged today, which makes the decrease by the Newcastle Permanent Building Society more important. The region's biggest home loan lender says the drop isn't a gimmick, coming as it does straight after the interest rate hikes of some banks.
Indeed, what we've planned has been in the pipeline for over a week since our last board meeting.
The Building Society is optimistic the rate cut will help to encourage more people to build their homes and keep Newcastle's recovery rolling along.
What we're doing is intended to provide benefit, to stimulate building, employment, economic activity and indeed benefit for all.
The Building Society says it may be the last chance people get at the low interest rate, with no cuts planned for the future. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
The Cessnock course was loose on the ground, producing plenty of dust. Port Macquarie policeman Lindsay Collitz didn't mind how much dirt he threw around as he took his frustrations out testing his new Nissan Pulsar.
The slippery, dusty conditions give us a bit of an advantage being a four-wheel drive.
The rally sprint involves 3 laps of the 8-kilometre course during the afternoon and then 3 circuits in the dark.
You can't see over the crest, you can't see around some of the bends where you're able to see before in the daylight. You're not going to be able to see at night.
The Cessnock event is also used by many of the privateers as a last chance to find any mechanical faults before the first round of the State Rally Championship in Wauchope later this month. The point score was still close heading into today's final round, so the pressure was on for placings. Mother Nature held out though, providing a 10 to 15 knot easterly. The Sabo sailors are relatively new to the sport, but every one of them knew about jostling at the start line. The 9.5 kilometre course provided sailors with plenty of opportunity to show off their acquired skills. And although he's only new to racing, Morissette's Greg Dunn won plenty of points for determination. He finished last in every race but refused to give in, even though he was getting lapped. Other sailors, though, must have wished at times that they'd stayed at the jetty. And for the first time in years, the weather couldn't be faulted. Every day of the event has had clear skies and good winds.
The Lilly family found the horse shortly after 7 o'clock this morning, stuck in their backyard drain. 7-year-old Harley was stranded on the concrete island after he either overbalanced reaching for food or fell after being chased by dogs. The police rescue squad attempted to get the gelding up and out. They've had plenty of practice, with horses having fallen into the drain at least 3 times, Harley twice. A makeshift ramp was built to offer Harley his freedom, but he wasn't too keen on this one-way ticket out. Hay was brought in to help disguise the route to safety, and with the help of a few kind words and a rope, Harley was enticed out of the drain. The horse escaped relatively unscathed for his night's hardship, but did receive a gash to his right rear leg. 20-year-old owner Janelle Lilly has called on Lake Macquarie Council to erect a fence or to cover the drain to prevent a repeat of the incident. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
The social interchange within the clubs, which
Barry and Don Finch.
With Adelaide coming off a loss the night before, the Newcastle Falcons should have started confidently. But in the opening minutes, they looked to have left their skills in a box in the dressing room. Adelaide bounded away to a 13-point lead before the Falcons even scored.
And the Falcons probably one of the worst starts we've seen in a long, long time.
The game became a points duel, the Falcons closing the gap only to have Adelaide stay just in front. Newcastle's now Paynterton third quarter wobblies appeared again and proved costly. After jostling for the lead in the fourth quarter, Adelaide led by 2 points with just 1 minute to go and were burning the clock trying to hold on to possession. But they missed their chance and Derek Rucker seized his opportunity. The Falcons travel south on Tuesday night to play the Melbourne Tigers. It's no surprise the Falcons spent most of today's session shooting. The Falcons lost by 2 points on Saturday despite a sensational comeback in the fourth quarter where they recovered more than 20 points.
We paid the price for our mistakes. Adelaide are a good team and we're not going to have that many mistakes and beat a team as good as Adelaide.
In today's post-match debriefing, coach Tom Wisman told his team in no uncertain terms he was less than impressed with their commitment for most of the game.
The players know that they've got to get that extra intensity, and we've got to get that extra intensity from the start of ball games.
Tomorrow the Falcons travel south to play the Melbourne Tigers, and the team intends to have a very different approach.
Melbourne are a very talented team, a much bigger team, so they do play a different style of game, and they will be happy to grind it down with you. They play a tough half-court game, but they also get out and run, and so they're last year's champions. They're a very good basketball team, and we've got them on their courts.
One immediate and noticeable change will be in the team's facial hair. Last month, most of the players made a pact to grow goatee beards, and they would only shave them off if they lost. Apparently, after Saturday's performance, there weren't enough Gillettes to go around.
600 long-term unemployed youths are getting the opportunity to learn a trade through a Master Builders Association initiative called Build a Job. The scheme is being piloted around the country. 19-year-old Scott Madison is one of those involved. Build a Job represents a dramatic change in the traditional 4-year apprenticeship scheme. The new system takes 3 years, the first 6 months involving full-time study at TAFE, the remaining period shared between on-the-job training and theory. The scheme consists of 4 streams, these being civil, structures, services and finish and fit out. An apprentice will enrol in one of the 4 streams and learn a number of crafts within that one section.
If you take the old system as being a carpenter and joiner, he had a very narrow field of work that he was operating in. Under the new system, the carpenter and joiner type person will be able to do a whole range of increased skills. He'll be able to do glazing and painting and plaster work.
Multi-skilling is the major focus, a factor Scott Madison, who's doing the finish and fit out stream, acknowledges as important.
You're not going to be sick and tired of doing the same thing all the time, and it will give you more job opportunities later.
In the future, tradesmen like Scott would become known as building construction workers with a specialty in one of the 4 streams.
Unfortunately, the apprenticeship system, being craft-based, hasn't kept up with what industry demands. Industry at the moment is going more and more into packaging and less into craft specialisation.
Over the next 3 years, the system will be refined. It's expected to be implemented nationally as the formal apprenticeship program within 5 years. Builder scheme will also mean tradespeople skills will be recognised around Australia, not solely in the state within which the person trained. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
The $1 million development, which will create 5 jobs, would operate at the Tiger Oil plant at the industrial estate at Rutherford. The existing plant would be expanded threefold to cater for the increase in storage of oil waste. The company would treat more than 2 million litres of oil a year. 10% will be recycled and sold, the rest to be treated and dumped in landfill or the city sewer. Maitland councillors will vote on a proposal to inspect the site before making a final decision. Maitland Mayor Bob G is confident the development will proceed.
I personally believe that if it meets all the requirements of the authorities, and particularly the EPA, it should go ahead. I think people have to remember that today under the law, all firms, whether they be transport companies, bus companies, industrial firms, have to collect their waste. It has to be collected and it has to be treated somewhere.
It also gives Maitland Council a chance to rid itself of the anti-development tag given to it by Alumino Australia after that company's dross production plan was deferred. The independent study into the effects of the aluminium recycling plant is expected within 6 weeks. But if the study recommends the development be rejected, Alumino says it will take its case to the Land and Environment Court. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
The Hunter breast screening program, which was one of the first in Australia, today passed a significant milestone. Secretary Jan Collins became the 40,000th woman in the region to have a routine test to see if she has any of the early signs of this type of cancer.
For a little bit of discomfort, it's well worth going along.
Like most people who have the test, Jan Collins was given the all clear. Professor Forbes says since the Hunters screening program began in 1989, about 260 women have been found to have breast cancer, and more than 30 lives have been saved.
More than 30 women have avoided dying from breast cancer because they had a mammogram. No other reason, just because they had a mammogram. So we think there are very important reasons for women to have a mammogram.
Early detection has also meant the majority of women haven't required a mastectomy. Meanwhile, a national parliamentary inquiry is being held to look into the management and treatment of breast cancer in Australia. It's being done to help formulate a national strategy to manage the disease, something Professor Forbes welcomes.
Brad Godden was reported after an incident in Saturday's game against Canterbury. After being sin-binned for a professional foul, he allegedly tried to stop the Canterbury ball carrier after play was restarted before he left the field. Referee Bill Harrigan called Godden back and spoke to him before making it official in his match report. The unusual thing is, Godden has been cited on a charge of misconduct and damaging the image of the game.
As you say, it's unusual. There's not really a precedent for it that I know of, so what happens down there tonight will be pretty interesting.
One thing that appears to be causing a lot of damage to the Knights, though, is their inability to defuse bombs. Canterbury scored 5 times via the boot on the weekend.
Obviously, the teams that we have got in upcoming weeks will have pinpointed that as a weakness, so it is something we're going to have to work on.
Darren Curtis, NBN News.